I met Samuel and created a relationship with him. I had lived and worked there for 2.5 years, and really it was my time in Panama and during the Peace Corps that I really recognized the power of documentary and nonfiction filmmaking as a way to connect people and tell stories and create empathy and break down borders. And really it was just kind of, honestly, it was like my parents and family and friends and all the people I loved back home not understanding what I was going through in the Peace Corps in Panama, and who, where I was, and the Nobe community that I was just falling in love with, and these friends and family that I was making in Panama. And I was like, I'm just going to use video as a way to tell stories of like, this guy Roberto that I've been talking about, like, this is him, he's an amazing teacher in this community, and this is what he does. And I just saw how powerful of a tool it was. And so the issue of fair trade really came up when I had an experience coming back to the States after being in Panama for 2.5 years. And I went into a grocery store and I picked up a chocolate bar, and I saw a man's face on the back who was from my community. And it had all these claims of, what fair trade was doing, and, how any extra, money you spend on this chocolate bar is going directly to the farmer and whatnot. And I knew that that wasn't the case because I had been to the co-op so many times with the farmers there. And I knew that they also didn't know that, they were on the back of chocolate bars back here in the US. And I ended up bringing that chocolate bar back to Panama when I filmed El Cacao and showed it to the guy, and he actually thought it was pretty cool. He's like, oh, that's so great, I'm on the back. I'm trying to explain, no, but this means that they think you're making more. And he was like, similar experience to Samuel, like, oh my gosh, like that, if they only knew, fair trade, they call it fair trade, it's not fair to us. I don't know who they think it's fair to. But he did love the idea that he was on, his face was on the back of the chocolate bar. So that was how I came about that story with El Cacao. And that was my thesis film when I was in graduate school at UC Santa Cruz in a social documentation program. And so I went back there for the summer. It had been about 3 years since I left the Peace Corps, and had a, wonderful, beautiful reunion, and then was able to find Samuel to tell the story through. And then No Place to Grow, I was actually screening El Cacao at the graduate symposium at UC Santa Cruz. And it was an environmental studies PhD student who approached me and just said, I'm doing research in this community garden at Beach Flats, and they received this letter. And she was just kind of reaching out to me like, we need someone with a camera to document the fact that the city is not responding. Like, we've been trying to call, we've been trying to get answers on what this really vague letter that the gardeners received, what it actually means. And can you just come down with your camera to get some sort of like, visual evidence as to what it means? Of course, in my mind, I'm like, just finished a project. I'm interested in starting a new project. I don't really like to commit to anything until I know that it really is a film that I want to commit to for years, right? Because these films take a long time to make. So initially I just kind of started with, I'll show up with my camera and kind of be a journalist, as it were. But I knew immediately, when I showed up in the garden, that this was a story that, was definitely worthy of the years that it ultimately ended up taking for me to finish the project. And just something I was very, very passionate about. And I met Emilio and I met Domingo, and I could see how much, they cared about the garden, and really how unique and special this space was for the Santa Cruz community and for the Beach Flats community. And that's kind of how all the stories, my films come about. It's just kind of, I follow my curiosity and I follow my gut, and I know by now that these films take a long time to make, so it has to be something that I really care about. And there's, aspects of fundraising, and, it's a lot of work. So it has to be something that like I feel very deeply about in my heart. And I also want to see the potential of a story arc, right? So with the garden, it was like, I showed up the first day and that's when they received the letter, and I knew it was the beginning of a story, right? So it was like, if I had shown up the last day, it could be potentially like a historical of talking heads talking about what was, but the type of films I like to make, I really want to kind of immerse the audience into experiencing what's happening over time. And so the fact that I showed up the first day and they received the letter and we went to city council that day, and you know, that scene where we're like trying to track down one of the city council members to try and understand what the letter meant, that was the first day of filming. So it was obvious that there was a clear story arc that would lead to a really powerful and moving film. So yeah, so that's kind of my introduction to those two.
Thank you. What really fascinates me about that is, I don't know, you spend years and years of your life committed to telling these stories, and it just brings me back to the importance of oral histories in Indigenous communities and Latina communities, and how they hold truth and history like since time immemorial. But I feel like you are part of continuing that tradition. So I really admire that part of your art.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you so much. And honestly, with No Place to Grow, we ended up getting a California Humanities grant to do an oral history of each individual gardener. There were 27 at the time. So we did interviews with each of them about how they came to Beach Flats and how they came to the garden. And it was in the, it's archived in the museum in Santa Cruz now. And it was on display there for a little over a year, where you can go up and kind of, you know, put headphones on and interact with each of the gardeners, and that could show you their plot and explain, you know, the seeds that they brought there, and just, you know, share their culture and their history and their like immense knowledge with you. So that was a really fun part of it as well.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
If we can pivot to El Cacao first, and then perhaps talk about more about No Place to Grow. So following the stories and conversations with the farmers in the Ingave community in El Cacao, in your eyes, is there a way to reform the system of trade so that they are fairly and justly compensated? And, you know, is such a thing even possible in the face of capitalism and exploitation that comes with international trade? As someone that spent a long time in that community, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's really hard, right? Because when I came back from Panama, that's all I wanted to do was like go to my local co-op and buy fair trade and like, you know, contribute to the farmers that I knew were the ones that were working so hard and had the knowledge to bring, you know, these commodities to market. And I do, through my research, I do think that fair trade had very good intentions. I think it's just fair trade within the global system hasn't worked, at least with chocolate, with El Cacao, or with cacao. And I think, you know, for chocolate consumption, I also, you know, I didn't want to make a film that was like, no one could eat chocolate anymore, because, you know, you go, oh, great, I can't even buy fair trade chocolate now. Like, I can't eat chocolate anymore. But there's really great bean to bar companies out there that are doing direct trade, right? They're like getting on an airplane and going down to these communities and creating a relationship with these farmers and making a commitment, you know, to learn from them, to teach them, to like grow together, and they buy directly from them. So it's like the beans are going directly to these bean to bar companies, and they're, you know, there's no kind of third, fourth, fifth parties in between, where a lot of that kind of the issues that came with fair trade of not being able to kind of track the additional dollars consumers were spending back down to the farmers. I think that's where the issues were, of trying to regulate that, you know, direct trade, even though they don't have a label associated with it, kind of inherently does that, right? So Dandelion chocolate out of San Francisco is a great one. Madagascar is a good one. Ritual chocolate, Patrick chocolate. Those are kind of the four main ones that I studied and researched when I was making the film. But really, I feel like any bean to bar, like local bean to bar chocolate company that is like obsessed with chocolate, and they usually are, they're usually very transparent too, right? They like love the idea of celebrating, you know, where they get the beans from, and, you know, talking about the weather patterns in that country and the knowledge of the farmers. And So, if there's anything of our company in your community, just ask them, talk to them about it. And usually they're very transparent in how much they're getting paid and, who they are. So, so it's all, it's not all bad news, I'd say. We can still eat chocolate.
Good. And thank you for helping us find some avenues to support those farmers directly. I'll definitely be looking into some of those chocolate companies.
Yeah.
I love chocolate
Oh,
personally.
you know what? There's one more thing too with Samuel in particular. If anyone ventures down to Panama, they have set up, and this may be a question that have come up, but I'll just address it now. But they are selling directly to tourists that come to their community now. So instead of going through the co-op, they've created a tour where they bring people from the Bocas Island, which is like the biggest tourism island in Panama on the Atlantic side. And they bring them into their community, which is it's like a 20-minute boat ride and like a 15-minute bus ride and then another little hike. But tourists come into their community and they'll do a cacao tour through the farm, and then they'll sell them chocolate afterwards. So if anyone goes to Panama, they can, go to Samuel's community and walk his finca with him and, buy some of his chocolate. And that's been really, really, really great for them. He's almost, I think the last time I talked to him, he wasn't even selling in the global market anymore. He's just selling directly to consumers that were coming from the island. So it's called Oreba chocolate. And I can put a link to that when we're done, if anyone makes it down to Panama and wants to visit him.
Yeah, I would love to visit Samuel in Panama if I ever have the privilege of going there. Thank you for telling us about that. Yeah, I'm glad things are going well for him, following up on the story that you presented in the movie. We have a question from one of our audience members. Our participant lists are not working very well tonight. So it says Nicola Walters, but I don't know if that's actually their name.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of Nicola Walters.
Yeah. So their question is, the two films have in common the carencia of land. The neglect of farm work and the loss of land in the global south triggers migration of the dispossessed to the global north. How do you select these two sites? How do you see the two places connecting?
Oh man. Yeah, honestly, I feel like it was just kind of the next story that came along that I was passionate about and interested in. I think that the PhD environmental studies student sought me out because I had the film El Cacao, and she was like, this was in line with what she saw in the community garden. And, something deep in my heart was like, oh yeah, these are the type of stories that I want to tell. But to be honest, my career hasn't focused on, the film I'm making right now is about mixed martial arts and, in South Lake Tahoe, California. So it's not at all related to land or environment or Indigenous, studies or anything like that. So I think it's more about finding the right story and something that that I'm passionate and that I care about. And I really like to tell stories through individuals. So I think it's really powerful to kind of tell a larger global social issue story through an individual who's experiencing that social injustice. And so a lot of it is about, showing up and finding one individual who's experiencing that issue and making sure that there's, that there's a story to tell through them. Otherwise, it could be a paper, or it could be a book, or it could be, just an interview, which are all great and powerful, mediums to learn and grow and create conversation. But, when it comes to nonfiction filmmaking, I really feel like it's powerful to find that character to empathize with. So that's usually one of the main things that I look for in telling the story. And when I went to the garden and met Emilio, it's like, it's like, oh yeah, he's definitely someone that can, help me tell this story as a collaborator in that way. So I would say that it was more serendipitous and not necessarily exactly in line with kind of my career trajectory.
So looking at the garden and No Place to Grow, what do you feel, or what have you observed is the responsibility of private property, private interests, business owners, etc., to their community, as was said in the introduction, a trabajar por los demás, right?
Yeah, I feel like this is a lot more evident in No Place to Grow, especially than El Cacao. And I think, one of the women in the community meetings said it really eloquently, where it was like, I think one of the city council members was like, the Seaside Company doesn't have anything, they don't have any responsibility, but we do as your city council members. And she's like, no, like they do have, community benefit. They have corporate responsibility to give back to this community. And I think, I knew that going into the film, but it was very evident, I think, spending so much time in the Beach Flats community of like them being, bearing the burden of this commodity of it. If anyone's spent any time in Santa Cruz, they know it's all about the boardwalk, right? And the Seaside Company owns the boardwalk. And so there's this community of Beach Flats that lives adjacent to it. And they have the cars, the pollution, they have the noise pollution, and then they don't have any green space. It's like, so they're the ones that are kind of sacrificing, and there should be, which is kind of reinforced what I already knew, but even more so, there should be a community, benefit and corporate responsibility of the Seaside Company to get back to the neighborhoods that they're impacting through their, through what they're producing in the community. So, and, the way that I approached No Place to Grow early on was I actually wanted a character or subject from the garden, and then I wanted one from the Seaside Company, because I recognized that there were some nuances here with the garden being on their property, right? It was leased to the city for 25 years, but it was still private property. So I felt like that there would be a lot of benefit, especially knowing that I wanted the film to go into educational distribution, some benefit to having both sides to create that conversation in the classroom of like, who's right, who's wrong. And there's nuance in there that I really wanted to be represented in the film. And I reached out a handful of times to the Seaside Company, and they weren't interested in participating or being a part of the story in that way. And I explained it, in that way. But I think there was a lot of mistrust and, a fear, I guess, of what it actually would have been. So ultimately, it's only a 30-minute film anyway. So I think it benefited from kind of having one voice in that way. But yeah, there is still a lot of nuance, I'd say, in who has a right to the land after 25 years of the gardeners working the land, and it being, this place of like prostitution and, just like they owned it and they changed it, and it was an incredible community benefit for so many years. And to this day, they still live with 60-40. So they still have 60% of the garden that they're, growing and harvesting, and it's still beautiful. And they still have, birthdays there, and the posadas there. And it's just a beautiful community space, but they also live in fear of not knowing if that letter is going to come, the next day, which, isn't fair. So.
Yeah. Like, placing the private property and profit above community through gentrification is a really clear continuation of like settler colonial structure and processes. Like they've been on that land for over 25 years and cared for it and poured their love into it. At what point is, does private property become obsolete in the face of like the actual relationship with the land?
Which is something why, I knew this was a very local story, but I also knew it was national and even international in that way, right? It was like, this is something that's happening in Santa Cruz, but I know that other communities can definitely relate to this, whether it's a community garden or a park or, just a green space that they don't want to be developed. It's happening all over the place and gentrified neighborhoods. So, yeah.
So what was it like to experience that community rallying around the garden and its caretakers? Like we see this in microcosms everywhere, but you've documented it and elevated that voice. And you were kind of at the center, you were witness to the center of this action. And to quote one of the participants of the movie Todos Juntos Podemos Ganar, what was it like to see that rallying of the community, and how do you think we can learn about this community organizing and action specifically and bring it into our own communities in resistance and resilience against these like gentrifying and colonial structures and processes?
Yeah, I think personally, I was approaching it and going into the project with like, I know I'm playing this for like the long game. I know these films take a long time to make. And like this story is, and I even had this conversation with Emilio and Domingo, like, I'm making this film about this garden, but like, it's going to help other communities that are going through similar things in the future. These films take years to make, basically like, don't count on me to help you save the garden. I'm not here as a journalist. I'm not here as, I think they knew I was an ally, and it was very obvious that I cared about the garden in that way, but I wanted to make it very clear that my film was going to take a lot more time to make. And it wasn't probably, I wasn't going to be done filming until we knew what was going to happen with the garden. And then I would start editing. But then early on, I actually ended up, because of the power, I think, of film, I ended up making them like a 5-minute piece. I'd say like 2 months into the project, because I believe in the power of film. And, there were a lot of city council members that weren't coming down to the community and weren't seeing the benefit of the garden in the community. And so I wanted to make a piece that they could use at city council and show and share, which is something that I, don't normally do with the projects that I commit to, but I felt really strongly about. And I think that they, really appreciated that. And a lot of what I do too is trying to, create a relationship with the subjects and, kind of gain access to them and their story and trust in that way. And I think that really helped a lot with Emilio and Domingo. And I just cared so much about the garden. So it's like, I have to make something that shows how special this place is, that could be a faster kind of turnaround. So yeah, I kind of forget what your initial question was, but
no, that's okay. I guess from that experience and seeing all of this community rally around El Jardín, what do you feel we can bring out of this and apply to our own communities regarding community organizing and action to really, I don't know, take effective action against like private property and these like really disturbing, dislocating processes?
Yeah, I mean, it was really incredible to see the way that the community rallied around the Beach Flats community, and the coalition just grew and grew and grew every week. I mean, that circle, around the tree, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And there were, lots of meetings, I would say. Like I ended up with actually over 400 hours of footage, that it ended up being a 27-minute film. But a lot of that was meetings, right? And I would just kind of show up and film the meetings because you never know what's going to happen or what's going to be said or whatnot. But I think a big part of that is just like, just sharing knowledge. And I mean, personally, I've gone to this work because I feel like visuals and, sharing stories is a really, really impactful way of creating empathy. And I really feel like if you can create that empathy, that's a bridge to like have a bigger, deeper conversation, right? If you're like, look at this person's just like you, and you have, you care about your family, you want your family to have organic food, so does Emilio. And like, look at, you have this beautiful community garden, or you have access to organic food like Emilio doesn't, it's like, and you don't have to say that in the film or in whatever story you're making or telling, whether it's through writing or visuals or whatever. But I think that connecting people in a way where it's like you can humanize someone, and it's less of like a big global social issue that we're like reading about and talking about. And it's like, no, these are real people, and these are our neighbors, right? They're just right over the street, right over there, the boardwalk that we take our kids to all the time. Like, they literally live right next door to it, you know, and they have this beautiful community garden and the gates are open and we can go visit. And so I think, you know, that's the way I've approached kind of this community action, is just like, oh, well, we just need to make those people care, you know? So that's the way I do it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there's still no heart.
I mean, and what you've let us as the public see, I feel like you have done it very effectively, personally.
Thank you.
So I guess my final question, because I know we're running to the end of our session and discussion with you, do you have any upcoming projects that you would like to tell us all about? You mentioned a mixed martial arts film in Tahoe, if you want to talk about that or anything else.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I do have 2 films right now actually that are like really close to being done. I just picture locked one today. I wrote to my composer. I was like, it's done, it's coming your way. That might change tomorrow. We'll see. But yeah, so I have one film about the mixed martial arts community here in South Lake Tahoe, which is a small, you know, community mountain town, and kind of how having mentorship and community and goal setting can get you through really tough times in life. And so these are kids that, you know, I kind of follow 2 characters, and one of them went through a really, really tough time, and he kind of came back to MMA after a fatal car accident and being in like really, really bad shape. And so I followed his comeback story and kind of how he uses mentorship and his coaches and community to face the adversities in his life. And that's called Momentum, and that'll be out probably in about 2 months. And then my other film right now I'm working on is about prospecting. Actually, it's like kind of a historical film, but it's about a contemporary gold prospector who's using, you know, panning for gold the way that the 49ers did, but very much in touch with the land and the Miwok Nation, which is the land that he lives on, and outside of Yosemite, and kind of his relationship with them. And that'll be a short film that'll be for educational distribution as well. And that's called The Prospector. And that is, that'll hopefully be done within the next month as well. So yeah, and those have been like about 3 or 4 years in the making. So I'm happy to be wrapping those up and then, you know, looking for new stories. So we'll see what comes up.
I mean, congratulations. That's huge. You've spent so much of your life making these films, so congratulations. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us tonight and join us. It's really an honor.
Yeah, thank you guys. If anyone wants to follow my work, just, you know, Small Pumpkin Productions, you can just Google it and find my website and all the social media stuff there.
Okay. And then thank you for everyone in the audience for joining us tonight. This was the last of our spring 2022 film screenings, but we will be back next year with more, and hopefully they will be live in the Food Sovereignty Lab, which will be built and open. Michelle, if you're ever in WIOT territory up in Humboldt, I would love for you to join us in the lab. It will be officially open. Maybe we can screen some more of your films.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, I'd love that.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm going to say good night. Thank you for joining us.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.